and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. And today we are continuing talking, we're veering off a bit. We've been talking about quiet quitting, we've spoken about the great resignation, we've talked about quiet quitting. And so there's a part of this that I think we might have overlooked somewhat. Now, lots of people say it's lonely at the top. And I definitely know that from the many executives that I coach, because when there is no one else above you, who do you speak to when you have a problem? Just think about it. If you are the CEO or MD of a company, if you need to soundboard things, you can't necessarily immediately go to the people who report to you. And you might not necessarily, if you have a board, you might not necessarily first want to go to them. You first want to think things through on your own. And so that is where the saying comes from, it's lonely at the top. And might I add that as a coach, I think we make quite valuable contributions as being that soundboard that is impartial. But there's another step to this, and that is, what is the effect of a manager who's lonely at the top, or an executive who's lonely at the top? What is the effect of that on the rest of the business? You see, as again, you know me and my Gallup stats, but my favorite Gallup stat is that 70% of employee engagement depends directly on the manager. So the question is, what if the manager is not engaged? I don't know, and I'm sure that there's a movie, and the name has now escaped me. It is with Will Smith, and they have some form of intelligence monitoring. I think it was those little spidery things that would walk up and down the stairs in the movie. I can't remember the name, for love or money. And then he has this discussion with his wife about what he does in the movie. And she says, so you monitor people? And he goes, yes. And she says, okay, but who's monitoring the monitors? And he explains the situation. And she says, okay, but then who's monitoring the monitors of the monitors? And she keeps on going to prove to him that at some point in time, the system will break, because there is, who is the top of the pile here. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because while we're talking about great resignation, while we're talking about quiet quitting, it's very easy for us to sort of get stuck on, what do we do right for the employee? And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because they've often gotten a rough deal. And we were talking about it yesterday again, that why is work often dealt with as punishment? Well, I pay you to do it, so just do it. I don't care whether you like it or not. Why can't work be something that is more fulfilling? I give you the opportunity to learn about this instead of the punishment angle. But what really stood out for me around COVID was the fact that, there's that saying of, this is why we get paid the big bucks. But actually what happened during COVID was employees were taking strain, and companies were trying to understand, how do we keep them going? How do we take care of them? How do we ensure their productivity, their performance? Even in some very nice cases, how do we ensure their mental wellness is maintained? So those are the employees. At the top, we had, the leadership, the very senior leadership of the company going, how do we do this, but we still make the money? How do we keep ourselves financially viable and sustainable? And that is a right question, because that is their job, right? Doesn't help, it all falls apart and we have no jobs to come back to. Then we're going to ask, why didn't they focus on performance and sustainability at that point? But I think we've got a little bit of a sandwich issue. And the filling in our sandwich were the managers, where, they were part of the process of taking care of those employees who needed their support. And they were held responsible for trying to maintain the business end of things. Now, I often draw this on a whiteboard. And what I draw is basically a little seesaw on a little pivot. On the one hand, we've got the heartbeats. We've got humans that we want to take care of. And on the other side, we've got the spreadsheets. And that is the business end of business. How do I make revenue, and how am I profitable, and how do I make sure that all the numbers chime? And there was this constant tension between the heartbeats and the spreadsheets for attention. But actually, no one was looking at how it wears on the pivot. And I think the middle management layer are that pivot, or the management layer. So I'm excluding the execs. I think they do the spreadsheet thing more often than not. So if we say that 70% of employee engagement is up to management, what is the effect of not taking care of that management layer because they get paid the big bucks? And I think that it's really important that we go back and reflect on what was the impact on them, because they were so busy taking care of everyone else, and they were so busy taking care of the business, but actually they're just human too. That manager also had to learn to work from home. They maybe had to homeschool their child. Like me, they had to put up with their dogs that bark during meetings. They also had to go and stand in queues during COVID in order just to get food. That takes away from work time. So they were trying to keep absolutely everyone balanced at that point in time. And I wonder if we've missed the impact that it has had on them. So now looking forward, what we see is, everyone must get back to work. Everyone must, things must just carry on. We just go back to all the old way of doing things, get back into the office. If you had a notebook, it gets replaced by a desktop again. If you had to commute very far, and even though we know it is very far, we're going to make you come back in. I'd like us to take a moment and just respect the transition that the managers managed to get in this 2-year time. And instead of then just going back wholesale and saying, hold on, let's just go back to the way it was, placing more pressure on the managers because now they've got to undo everything that was done during COVID. And they yet again at the coalface of people going, but we don't want to. We've learned that it can work differently. This different way works better for us. I think before we force managers into undoing that, let's take a really hard look at how it did work for the company and rather address the issues that have arisen as individual points rather than going, it was just easier to do it the old way. So let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because actually in many ways, so many more opportunities were opened up, both for employees and for business in our virtual world of work now, that I think that we do everyone, including the business, a disservice in making things unhappen, as Ross would say, on Friends. So I would like you to go and sit down with your managers and just take a hard look and firstly acknowledge, what did we change? And then instead of just unchanging it, saying, what did work? Why did it work? What did we learn? What was unexpected about this? And what did we actually know would work? But, there was no momentum. There was no reason to change it. And then identify, what is it that's not working that we need to take care of? You see, I think that there's a balance to be had here, is that it's just easier to go back to what we know. But I think if we evaluate what works and what doesn't work, we might find that in this new way, only 10% or 15% doesn't work. Then it's not worth it to upend everything and go back to an old system that so many people just don't want anymore. So I hope that a bit of proper reflection on what happened here and what we can do about it and how we can change it, I hope that that's going to help you identify how far have we come, how do we show gratitude to our managers. And if we're not going to show them gratitude by actually acknowledging what they've been through, then at least let's show gratitude by not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Please remember that we also stream these, so there are other opportunities to see them. They also get posted on our Performance Cafe pages as well. And let's see, are there any questions? Now, I have to wait a couple of seconds because last time there was a question and I missed it just because I had managed to dash off. And so be it. And so we've got a question. And it actually alludes to something that I've spoken about before, I think. The question is, how do we show appreciation to those managers? I think the first thing is, if you've built something over 2 years, making them not undo it might be a good way to show that appreciation. But for those of you who would like some more concrete options, there is a book, and it is called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in Business. And I'm going to put a link on this page below because all of a sudden I want to say Chapman and White, but I could be wrong around who the authors are. But they have a great way of understanding different types of appreciation in the business. And you will know the name because it's loosely based on the 5 love languages. So it takes a look at how individuals respond to different things like words of encouragement, acts of service. Of course, there is the angle of touch, which most HR professionals would prefer we don't use, but it does include a handshake, so it doesn't have to be anything too concerning. So they've taken their love languages and adapted it to how do we see how people respond to particular types of acknowledgement and how we know to do more of or less of that and actually customize it to each person in the business. And that seems to be it for today. I'd like to thank you for joining me. It's always special having everyone here. If you're watching this somewhere else or later, please pop comments and send us notes. Let us know where you're seeing it from. Do whatever you do on that particular platform so that we know that we are still covering the right topics for you. And then until next week, I will see you at the next Performance Cafe.